Revenge with Karen.
I knew the company was built on duct tape, and denial the moment the CTO used the phrase reboot the licensing node like it meant something. Newsflash, there was no node, there was me. A 44-year-old systems engineer duct taping a Frankenstein stacked together at 2 a.m. with one hand in a bag of stale pretzels and the other in a half-broken command shell. And for years, that was fine. No one cared how it worked, only that it worked. Until it didn't. So when I quietly spun up my LLC, Plain Text Ops LLC if you're wondering, and signed a maintenance contract for 20 grand a year, I didn't hide it. Why would I? It was literally in the invoice system. It wasn't some secret side hustle. It was a legal entity doing work the company didn't want to W-2 me for. And guess what? I was still answering the same midnight Slack pings, still fixing the same spaghetti scripts no one dared touch. Just got to pat themselves on the back for reducing headcount on paper. That 20 grand, it wasn't even hazard pay. It was hush money for the mess I kept quietly holding together. API license provisioning, token rotation, dependency patching. None of it glamorous, but every damn bit of it critical. Still, no one read the master services agreement. Not really. Especially not the CFO. Trevor looked like someone had stuffed a middle manager into a vape pen, just saw a contractor expense he didn't like. Now, before I get too deep into the wreckage, let me say this real quick. If you're enjoying this mess, and trust me, it only gets worse from here, hit that subscribe button and toss us a like. I know it's cliché, but it actually helps our team keep doing this full-time while surviving off caffeine, spite, and your engagement. Okay, back to the implosion. Over the next 6 months, I moved quietly, shifted all provisioning scripts to go through my LLC's cloud endpoint, migrated license keys, set up redundant logging on my own infra. Again, not in secret, just no one asked. The only difference was the email on the access logs changed from Linda@company to Linda@plaintextopscom. And yet, it kept churning. Customers stayed live. Sales kept sliding contracts across the table. Revenue went up. The CEO got to brag on LinkedIn. I stopped going to the office altogether, told them I'd work remote full-time. No one objected, not even when the tech leads started tagging me on Jira tickets like I was still on payroll. Linda will fix it, they'd say, and I would, because I wasn't just holding the glue. I was the glue. It was during a cost optimization town hall that I realized how close I was to the exit ramp. Trevor stood there, smug as a Roomba with a god complex, saying we'd saved 18% in staffing costs last quarter. My camera was off, but I laughed. Loud, because that savings, that was me. They laid me off without laying me off, and now they were bragging about it. That's when I checked the MSA again, just for fun, just to see if the clause was still there. Section 14.2b. Breach of payment terms equals immediate revocation of service. No mediation, no arbitration. Just lights out. And who signed that clause? Me. As president of Plain Text Ops LLC, not as Linda the invisible staffer, not as Linda the burnout engineer, as Linda the vendor. They wanted to save money by cutting headcount, so I let them. I gave them exactly what they asked for, a clean exit, a contractor on paper. No severance, no confrontation. Just a polite invoice every quarter and a login they assumed did nothing important. So I waited, I watched, and I prepared. Because eventually, someone like Trevor always tries to cut the wrong cord. And when he did, well, let's just say the dashboards didn't go dark because of a bug. They went dark because I flipped the switch. It happened on a Monday, of course. Like all corporate backstabbings, right after the first sip of lukewarm coffee and before the second wave of emails could hit. Weekly Sync was the usual parade of false optimism and project update theater, complete with fake smiles and muted mics. I was half listening, half troubleshooting a third-party auth loop for a legacy client who hadn't updated since the Obama years. Then, Trevor cleared his throat with that smirk he always wore when he was about to ruin someone's week to make his dashboard smile. Before we wrap, he said, straightening his ironic budget t-shirt like it was a blazer, just a quick update on vendor realignment. As of this morning, we've terminated Plain Text Ops LLC's access credentials. IT is handling the rest. He didn't look at me. He looked around me like I wasn't there, like I was just another Outlook calendar event getting deleted. Someone asked, "Wait, Linda's team?" Trevor raised a hand. No disruption expected. All systems should remain operational. It's just a cleanup, just business. He smiled wide like he just farted and wanted applause. I didn't say a word, didn't blink. just unmuted long enough to say noted, then clicked the red leave meeting button before anyone else could speak. No dramatic exit, no eye roll, just a flatline log off. Because the thing about Trevor was, he always played checkers in a chess arena. In his finance-fried brain, access revoked meant control revoked. That's where he screwed up. He thought system access was the power, but access is just the key to the house. Ownership is the deed, and sweetheart, I own the plumbing, the wiring, the damn foundation. I sat back in my chair, pulse surprisingly steady. Sure, I felt the jolt of it, like being slapped with a silk glove, but mostly what I felt was a shift, like a gear locking into place. Because Trevor just violated Clause 14.2b in the MSA. The ink on the Q3 invoice hadn't even dried. I opened my private terminal, typed a quick check command into my LLC's console, and watched as over 86% of their active licensing flow still routed through my infrastructure. They didn't know what I did. That was always the joke. I'd been warning them for years. I'm not DevOps, I'm DevOps, because if I vanish, oops, there goes production. They laughed like it was cute. Oh, Linda, they'd say, you're such a critical snowflake. Damn right I was. The whole avalanche was built on me. Trevor must have thought I'd grovel, call in, beg to keep the contract. But I'd spent too long being the silent backbone to bother with theatrics now. This wasn't a revenge story. Not yet. This was asset protection. This was me honoring my contract to the letter while they walked directly into a breach. What he didn't realize, and what legal hadn't bothered to check, is that revoking my access wasn't just rude. It was a documented violation, a trigger. And the systems they thought IT handled, they didn't even know where half of them lived. DNS records still pointed to my containers. Encryption keys still passed through my token distributor. They assumed vendor meant expendable. They forgot vendor meant external ownership. And so, I waited. Waited for them to notice that the shiny dashboards didn't mean the engine still worked. Waited for someone in IT to open the Jenkins pipeline and realize the deploy keys had expired 6 hours ago. Waited for the CFO to notice that removing me from Slack didn't stop the heartbeat monitors from stuttering. See, Trevor thought he yanked the plug. What he actually did was punch a hole in the power grid and then wonder why the lights were flickering. By the time the Slack outage channel lit up an hour later, I already had the email drafted. One sentence, no drama, no threats. Subject, service revocation body, breach of payment terms, clause 14.2b. Immediate execution, L. Markel, President, Plaintext Ops LLC. I hovered over the send button. Funny how fast just business turns into just burn down the house. My home office doesn't look like much. 2 monitors, old keyboard with a missing shift keycap, a coffee mug stained with 3 jobs worth of burnout, a sticky note that just says clause 14.2b equals hammer. I sat down like I do every morning, still in the sweatpants I've had since the great layoff of 2020, and tapped my login to Plaintext Ops Management Panel. 2-factor auth buzzed my burner phone. Routine, boring, mundane. Then the dashboard loaded, green lines everywhere, like a satellite map of a city at night, lit up with traffic and life, all those endpoints pinging. CRM, link platforms, data aggregation tools, usage trackers. 73 enterprise clients, 48 of them still piped through my systems. All of them blinking, healthy, unaware their lifeline was about to get cut with surgical precision. Trevor had assumed cutting me off was as easy as disabling a username. The dumb bastard didn't even realize his company's license backend, the thing that authorized whether client dashboards loaded or looped endlessly, still routed through my provisioning API. My LLCs, not some buried bit of middleware he could redirect in Jira. I wasn't the endpoint. I was the system. I opened a private channel with Max, my operations contact at the server host. I'd onboarded him myself when I first spun up Plaintext Ops, partly because he was sharp and partly because he hated corporate nonsense even more than I did. I typed revocation trigger, breach of payment terms, section 14.2b, immediate. His reply came back in less than 10 seconds. Copy that. Executing disable protocol on keychain, alpha prod. Should I log IPS? I stared at the blinking cursor. My heartbeat didn't spike. No adrenaline. Just the same cold calm I'd had when Trevor smirked through his little coupe. Yes. Full log. Retain packet trails for 30 days. Then I hit send. 5 minutes later, a mid-sized logistics firm in Indiana saw their admin dashboard go blank. Not crash, not error, just void. No status, no activity, no access. It wasn't even dramatic, it was surgical. Cold. The thing about being in the background for years is you learn how to disappear things without noise. I watched the logs roll in. User attempt, /login response. 503 license invalid. Retry. /admin /overview. Response 403 token not recognized. Backend fallback. Disabled. Status. Silent blackout. From their perspective, it probably looked like a data center hiccup. The kind of thing fixed by unplugging the router or yelling at a confused intern. But within 10 minutes, 5 other clients started pinging ops tickets into the main Slack workspace. Not to me, to the company I used to work for. The one that revoked my access. They had no idea what was happening, because their internal dashboard still showed active licenses. Their metrics were blind. That's the beauty of ghost architecture. Remove one bone and the whole skeleton folds while the skin still smiles. I refreshed the panel again. More red lights now. By the time the CFO's assistant was probably finishing her second latte, client dashboards were winking out like Christmas lights during a blackout. At first, one at a time. Then in clusters. The old-school analytics suite went first, built in PHP by a guy who left the company 3 years ago, but it still relied on my license tokens to connect to cloud data. Then the billing interface. Then client usage graphs. I opened a new browser window and went to one of the demo dashboards the sales team used during pitches. Nothing loaded, not even the login form, just a white page. Like a ghost had exhaled over the company's face. They thought they could cut me out and the lights would stay on. What they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that for years I was the lights. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of my coffee. It tasted better than it had in months. And then I waited for the first "Are you seeing this?" to hit their internal chat. Because once one client screams, the rest start howling. And no matter how loud, Trevor tried to talk over it. He was about to learn something the hard way. If you treat the linchpin like a paperclip, don't be surprised when the machine falls apart. By noon, the company's Slack workspace looked like a fire alarm had gone off in a server farm. Every channel, sales, support, ops, dev, was lighting up with frantic messages. Is the dashboard down for anyone else? API error, invalid license token. Someone checked the status page, kind of digital screaming that smells like fear and stale conference coffee. You could practically hear the panic typing through the screen. I sat at home, second monitor split between my email and the live status logs of plaintext ops. The red lights were spreading like a slow bleed. CRM tools failing authorization. Billing integrations timing out. Analytics loops collapsing into 403s. A dozen systems flickering, one by one, into black silence. It was beautiful in a tragic, karmic sort of way. Like watching a tower crumble in reverse slow motion, each brick finally realizing gravity still applies. Ops posted a ticket, investigating potential outage. Someone replied under it, could this be linked to vendor access? Trevor chimed in 30 seconds later, no, it's handling it. Just a temporary sync issue. Temporary. That word always means, please, God, not my fault. Inside the office, imagined Trevor pacing in his Brooks Brothers socks, barking into speakerphone about restarting containers. He'd tell them to check the usual suspects, the data center, AWS credentials, the internal token generator. All things that looked right because I'd left them that way. What he didn't realize was that those systems were nothing but mirrors. The real licensing key, the heartbeat that gave every client their access, lived off-site. In my private vault, LLC, and the only way back in was through a contract he'd already voided. I refreshed my logs again. Another 6 clients down. The pattern was spreading geographically now, East Coast, Midwest, Europe. It wasn't catastrophic yet, but the silence was crawling fast enough to get noticed by anyone with a dashboard and a boss. The revenue monitor in their finance suite would already be flashing weird deltas. A smart person would have checked the MSA. Trevor wasn't that person. He probably stormed into IT like a general who just lost his map. Just fix it, he'd say, hands slicing the air. We pay you people for this. Meanwhile, IT would be quietly panicking, realizing they didn't even have the root keys path documented. Because documentation was Linda's thing. Everything was Linda's thing. The pipelines, the license rotation, the nightly audit scripts. Hell, API that verified their own internal credentials. That was Linda's thing too. And now Linda's thing wasn't answering pings. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't send a single email. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, sipping coffee gone cold, scrolling through the chatter on my private feed of system logs. Watching their world flicker and dim felt less like revenge and more like physics. You remove the keystone, the arch falls. That's not cruelty, it's design. Around 12:37 p.m., one of my old dev leads, a guy named Marco, DM'd me from his personal account. "Hey, weird question. You hearing about some kind of outage?" I didn't reply. Marco was decent. He'd always said thank you when I fixed his messes. I hoped he got out before Trevor started assigning blame. By 1 p.m., sales was losing it. Screenshots started leaking onto LinkedIn. A regional client rep wrote, "Our system's down," getting 400 threes on every key. The post lasted 9 minutes before it got deleted, but not before ops screenshotted it. Slack channels turned to chaos. Upper management started pulling staff into emergency Zooms. You could almost feel the building's oxygen drop. In my email, the pings began. Urgent, contact request from legal. Then follow-up, system licensing clarification. Then high-priority immediate response needed. Subject lines piled up like cars on black ice. Trevor sent one at 1:46 p.m. himself. Short, arrogant, exactly as expected. "Linda, we need your help resolving a configuration issue. Please respond ASAP." A configuration issue. That was his way of not admitting what it really was, a collapse. I didn't open it. Just tagged it read and archived it. Outside, the autumn light was fading. Office was silent except for the low hum of the server rack under my desk, the same rack that housed the only living copy of their license key. The sound of quiet power. At 2:04 p.m., Ops posted their last public update, outage identified. Root key location under review. That line made me laugh. Under review, like it was hiding behind a couch cushion. No one at that company could find the key because it wasn't lost. It was never theirs to begin with. War room was exactly what you'd expect. Glass walls, overpriced swivel chairs, half-drunk cans of La Croix sweating on illegal pads, and a table cluttered with laptops that couldn't connect to anything. No dashboards, no live metrics, just blank screens and a smell of panic that no citrus air freshener could cover. The CIO kept refreshing her browser like the act alone could summon back the licenses. Meanwhile, Trevor was in full CYA mode, arms folded, jaw clenched, trying to project calm while sweat bloomed like a guilty halo around his collar. Then the door burst open. Janelle, one of the junior counsels, fresh out of law school and still naive enough to think paper trails solve everything, stormed in with a manila folder clutched like it was radioactive. "I found the vendor MSA," she said, breathless, "for license management. The original." She tossed it on the table like a grenade. Trevor barely glanced at it. "IT signed that, right? Or maybe procurement?" Janelle blinked. "No, sir, that's not who signed it." He waved her off, already reaching for his phone. "We'll get someone from IT in here too." "It's not IT," she cut in, voice cracking now. It's Linda." The room froze. Someone from sales whispered, "Linda who?" Janelle swallowed hard and tapped the signature line with the back of her pen. "Linda Markel. As president of Plain Text Ops LLC. It's her company." A beat passed. Then Trevor scoffed. "That's ridiculous. She was just a contractor." Janelle didn't respond. She just flipped to the clause she'd highlighted, section 14.2b, then slid the document across the table. The GC leaned forward and read aloud, slow and deliberate, as if translating ancient scripture. Revocation rights retained by vendor upon breach of payment terms. Enforcement at vendor's sole discretion. Records custodian designation, vendor entity. The silence hit like a punch. Records custodian. That wasn't just a title. That was the legal owner of the licensing infrastructure. The person who held the power to revoke or enforce system access. And the vendor entity? That wasn't the company. It was Linda, through her LLC. Not an employee. Not someone who could be fired with a deactivated badge. Trevor stood there blinking like a man who just realized his brakes had been cut 3 exits ago. "So, wait," the CTO said, his voice rising like a squeaky door hinge. "She didn't just control the license API. She owns the enforcement." Janelle nodded. "And we breached section 14.2b, yes. The revocation clause triggered automatically when her access was terminated and payment lapsed." Trevor snapped. "No one reads those clauses." "Well," Janelle muttered, more to herself than anyone else. She did. Everyone stared at the contract like it might bite. On the far end of the room, someone opened the company's internal vendor portal. Sure enough, under authorized licensing integrators, it still listed Plaintext Ops LLC active, external, non-transferable. And right below it, the link to the MSA. Unchanged, unchallenged. Signed, sealed, and indexed in legal's database for over 11 months. The best part? No one had flagged it because it looked so normal. Just another vendor contract, buried in a pile of deferred compliance reviews and quarterly handwaves. Trevor sat down slowly. No more bluster, no smirk, just the 1,000-yard stare of a man who's realizing he stepped on a landmine and called it a cost-saving measure. Okay, he said, voice barely audible. How do we get her back? Janelle didn't answer. The GC spoke instead. Don't get her back. We breached the terms. She's within her rights. Another long pause. Then, from someone in finance, did anyone check what else that contract covers? Janelle flipped through the packet again. Her face went pale. It's not just license distribution, she said slowly. She owns the token issuance endpoints, access logs, audit trails, every operational backend that confirms system validity. She wasn't a contractor. She was the control system. No one breathed. Outside, another client ticket came in, system down. Live usage graphs not loading. Inside, the only thing left standing was Linda's claws, and the dread now leaking into every corner of the room. Trevor finally spoke, but the arrogance was gone. He sounded like a man trying to remember the name of the train that just ran him over. Then, what the hell do we do now? And for the first time since the outage began, there was no one left in the room with an answer. The first message came in around 3:12 p.m. A hastily forwarded Google Calendar invite titled Licensing Issue Resolution Urgent. No description, no agenda, just a 30-minute block marked high priority from Trevor's executive assistant. Sender address, norepley@company.com. Cute. I declined. Didn't even bother writing a note. Let them sit in that meeting with their iced coffees and dead dashboards, wondering if I'd log in or if I was watching from some untraceable backend like a ghost in the machine. 10 minutes later, a follow-up email came through, this time from legal. The subject line was different. Board escalation request attendance required. Polite, stiff, desperate. The body read, Linda, the board has requested your presence on the 3:45 call regarding contract clarification and license compliance. We appreciate your timely response. Attached the same Zoom link. This time it came with a PDF of the Master Services Agreement with Section 14.2b highlighted. I recognized the annotation format. Janelle, the junior counsel, smart girl, fast learner. I waited until 3:44 to join. The Zoom loaded like a funeral slideshow. Muted faces, rigid posture. 5 board members, the GC, the CTO, Janelle, looking like she was halfway through her second ulcer. Trevor, sitting dead center, arms crossed, lips pursed like he just sucked a lemon through a straw. Linda, the board chair began, voice trying for calm but landing somewhere between strained and terrified. Thank you for joining us. I nodded once. Of course. Trevor jumped in before anyone else could speak. There's been some confusion, he said, chuckling in that fake relaxed way guys do when they're trying to steer a sinking ship with charisma. I think this whole thing got blown out of proportion. We just need to clarify a few details and get everyone back on track. I smiled, faint but flat. There's no confusion. You breached. I enforced. The room went still. One of the board members unmuted, an older guy in tortoiseshell glasses who probably hadn't written a line of code in his life. Could you elaborate on that? I already had the contract pulled up. I shared my screen. This, I said, scrolling slowly to clause 14.2b, is the revocation clause, triggered by non-payment or termination of services without contractual release. You triggered both. Click, next page, and here I continued is the record's custodian designation. Me, not just technical access, legal authority, exclusive vendor control of license enforcement and provisioning endpoints. The GC stared like he was trying to astral project out of his body. Trevor muttered, we didn't mean to terminate the contract, just access. I let that sit for a moment. You can't revoke access to a system, I said quietly, that you don't own. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was raw, unfiltered. The kind of silence where careers die and lawyers take notes. Janelle cleared her throat. Linda, just to be clear, is the revocation reversible? It could have been, I said, before the enforcement triggers cascaded. Now the only way to reinstate is a new agreement. Clean terms, clean signatures, and full acknowledgement of breach. Another board member jumped in, a woman this time, finance background, sharp eyes. And if we don't? I looked directly into the camera, made sure the words hit square. Then your clients stay dark. Your dashboards stay offline. And every day that passes adds damages under the failure to remedy clause in section 9.3. Trevor looked like he was aging in real time, sweat at his temples. Jaw clenched so hard it looked like his molars were trying to escape. He leaned forward like he was still in charge. You really think you can hold the company hostage over a contract loophole? I didn't even blink. It's not a loophole, it's your signature. And that was the moment. The snap. The invisible but seismic shift where everyone in that room realized it. I wasn't the problem, it's the consequence. And no one, not Trevor, not the GC, not even the board, knew how deep the contract actually went. But I did, because I'd written it. And every clause they ignored, every line they skimmed, was now folding back around them like a closing fist. Trevor opened his mouth to speak again, but the board chair raised a hand. That's enough, he said. Let's regroup. I ended the call, didn't log off, ended it. No goodbye, no pleasantries, just silence. There's silence. And the low, steady hum of a system finally doing what it was designed to do, enforce the terms. They came back groveling faster than I expected. At 5:18 p.m., my inbox pinged with a new meeting invite, this time marked board leadership only private. No legal reps, no operations, just the decision makers. The ones who finally realized this wasn't about code or access, it was about authority. Subject line, proposal discussion reinstatement terms. I smiled, just a little. Not out of vindication, but out of sheer astonishment that it had taken them this long to read their own damn contract. I accepted, not because I needed anything from them, but because it was time to close the loop. The call opened with the board chair trying, and failing, to sound composed. He started with a line about wanting to reset the relationship constructively, as if this was a couples therapy session and not a smoldering legal disaster of their own making. Trevor was on the call too, eyes hollow, voice low, no jokes this time, no fake charm, just quiet desperation in a $200 haircut. The chair cleared his throat. Linda, we'd like to formally ask, what would it take to bring the systems back online? I didn't speak for a moment, just kept my gaze steady. Then I shared my screen again. This time I didn't scroll to 14.2b. They'd already bled over that one. I scrolled down, slowly, precisely, to clause 9.7, automatic revocation conditions. Black and white, plain as day. Clause 9.7 outlines the terms under which license revocation becomes irreversible unless a formal breach resolution is executed. I said, voice even. It includes violation of contract terms, unauthorized access termination, failure to honor payment schedules. I paused, letting them read. You could see the realization wash over the board like a wave of slow poison. You didn't just revoke my access, I continued. You voided your usage rights. The CTO blinked. So, what are you asking for? I'm not asking for anything, I said. This isn't a negotiation. This is a status update. Trevor shifted in his seat. You want money? I finally looked at him, dead center in the camera. No, Trevor, I wanted respect. But now, I want separation. Legal, permanent, and acknowledged in writing. The board chair looked stunned. You're saying the systems stay offline? They stay offline, I confirmed, unless the breach is acknowledged and settled. In writing, not with a check, with an addendum. Full transfer of liability for all downstream effects to your firm. I won't own your mess. Another silence. The chair rubbed his forehead. And if we don't sign that, I didn't flinch. Every customer with a failed dashboard will receive a notice from Plaintext Ops LLC detailing the contractual breach, revocation clause, and instructions for migrating to compliant infrastructure. Trevor finally snapped. You're bluffing. You wouldn't nuke your own clients. My clients? I said, almost laughing. Trevor, they were never my clients. They were yours. I just kept the lights on, and you pulled the plug. I let that land, or it looked like they'd swallowed thumbtacks. No one had an out, no workaround, no emergency contractor with magic keys. The entire licensing ecosystem had been built on a foundation they didn't own, and now they'd burned the deed. I'm not seeking revenge, I said calmly. I'm seeking closure. The GC, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. You want us to put it in writing that we breached? Yes. And agree to indemnify you from all third-party losses? Yes. And sign that within how long? I glanced at the clock. Before 6 p.m., I said, your dashboards won't come back unless you settle the breach in writing. Then I stopped sharing my screen, muted myself, sat back, and watched the board scramble in real time, realizing that all their power, the budget, the titles, the stock options, meant absolutely nothing without the one thing they'd thrown away, my signature. The board was fracturing. It started as a calm damage control session had turned into a slow-motion car crash, and I was just watching from the driver's seat they'd kicked me out of. No steering wheel, no brakes, just an ever louder impact countdown that none of them could stop. Trevor was unraveling, bit by bit, like a $400 tie fraying at the seams. He leaned forward again, this time with more sweat than swagger. "She doesn't have real power," he barked. "Admin-level access script. Anyone with back-end credentials can reverse it. We'll just migrate off her stack." Silence. Then the general counsel, finally recovering from his earlier coma, spoke without looking up from the contract. "That's incorrect. 3 words, no drama, no flair. Just the executioner reading from the final script." Trevor turned toward him, visibly irritated. "Excuse me?" The GC finally looked up. "The revocation isn't just a script, Trevor. It's an automated legal execution of a vendor-side clause, triggered by breach. Enforced by the designated records custodian. We can't reverse it." Trevor's neck flushed red. "It's a software switch. Reboot it, rebuild it, move it." The CTO, who'd been silent and visibly twitching for the last 20 minutes, finally cracked. "How did this even get signed?" That landed like a brick through a stained glass window. All heads turned to the general counsel. Janelle looked like she wanted to vanish into her chair. The GC didn't hesitate. "It went through finance," he said flatly. "The vendor review was greenlit by your office, Trevor. Your signature authorized it last year. No one spoke. No one needed to." Trevor blinked once. Twice. The blood drained from his face like a faucet had opened behind his eyes. He looked down, hands twitching. Then, so soft it was barely audible, he said, "It's her LLC." Someone on the board whispered, "Wait," so it was always hers. Janelle, suddenly braver with the truth on her side, nodded. "Yes, registered entity. Plaintext Ops LLC, Delaware registered, EIN verified, and approved through standard procurement. No shell games, just clean legal subcontracting." Trevor stood up, walked 3 steps away from the table, then turned and said, "No one told me." The GC raised an eyebrow. "You signed it. There it was." The crack. Not a scream, not a collapse. Just the quiet, horrifying realization that the very paperwork Trevor had ignored, the agreement he rubber-stamped while watching March Madness on his second screen, had become the bomb strapped to his entire department. The chair rubbed his temples. "So she owns the access, the trigger, the infrastructure, and the legal authority." "Yes," the GC said, "and she's currently the only party capable of reinstating services." Trevor dropped back into his seat, mouth slack, hands flat on the table. His ego had been bleeding since the call started, but now it was hemorrhaging in real time. Whatever illusion of power he'd clung to, his title, his budget, his smug control over my access, was dissolving under the cold light of contract law. He looked at me through the camera. But I didn't say a word, didn't smirk, didn't lecture, didn't gloat. I just waited. Because power doesn't yell, doesn't scramble. It doesn't need to flail when the storm hits. Real power sits still in the middle of the fire, calm and undeniable. And at that moment, I didn't just have power, I was the fire. The offer came at 5:56 p.m., 4 minutes before my deadline. Trevor didn't send it. He couldn't even look directly into the camera anymore. It came from the board chair's assistant, marked urgent amended agreement. Inside, a new contract. Revised terms, triple the original rate. Language about restoring my system access, outlining a new structure of collaboration, complete with all the groveling buzzwords they'd refused to say for the past year. I didn't even open the attachment. Instead, I dragged a different document into the reply field, one I'd prepped 2 days earlier. Plaintext Ops LLC Termination Addendum. Signed, notarized, timestamped. Body of my email was just one sentence. Contract concluded. Rights retained. All usage now considered unauthorized. Then I hit send. Back in the boardroom, I imagined someone swore under their breath. The chair probably muttered something about corporate risk. The GC would have nodded slowly, already mentally drafting the fallout documentation. And Trevor, I like to picture him just deflating. Like a party balloon 6 days after the party, finally giving up on pretending to float. But I didn't stay in that call long enough to enjoy the aftermath. I clicked leave meeting and didn't look back. Instead, I opened my own dashboard. Plaintext Ops LLC, live metrics stable. New client onboards, 3, projected MRR, up 27%, names on the list, you'd recognize them. 2 of their top enterprise accounts and 1 strategic partner they'd ignored for a year. Turns out, your infrastructure fails and your emails bounce. The vendor who kept your lights on becomes a very attractive option. I hadn't poached them. I didn't need to, they came to me. And unlike Trevor, they read the contracts. My systems weren't just operational, they were thriving. No Slack chains, no midnight pager alerts. Just clean back-end routing, healthy license pings, and a logbook that looked like a damn symphony. Quiet, controlled, mine. A new email pinged in. Subject, unauthorized login attempt, source IP, redacted hostname, former employer's domain. I smiled. Clicked archive. Then leaned back in my chair and watched the dashboard graphs climb, slow, steady, like a heartbeat finally freed from artificial compression. They thought firing me removed their problem. What they really did was free me from theirs. I didn't destroy them. I didn't sue. I didn't scream. I enforced. Because sometimes the cleanest revenge isn't public or loud or fiery. Sometimes it's just this: an inbox full of thank yous from your former competition, a revoked contract they begged to restore, and a simple system message glowing on your screen. Your former employer just tried to log in. Access denied. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.